Fei is our main character. He had a dream about his money, and when he awoke, he started playing games once more. Even though he slightly cheated when playing with his friend Duong, Duong was unaware of it. He checked his friend list and noticed that Van was still not online, despite the fact that it had been 18 hours. He decided to look at Van's personal page because he had some free time. Additionally, a professional player gave him a challenge at the same moment. He began playing seriously after realizing that the opponent was likewise a skilled player. He even had to enlist the assistance of rats. All of his game-related strategies were unsuccessful. He viewed her profile and discovered that it was empty. All of her team members were in a car with her. She looked into every piece of private information about Lu Mingfei. He wasn't really impressive and was simply an introvert. Fei enjoyed to play games and adapted to the surroundings inside extremely rapidly. They made sure that he was a self-sufficient person and that he had feelings for a classmate. Currently, he was living with his uncle and aunt. They constantly bullied him, and even the money his parents provided him was taken by his aunt and uncle. Most of his clothes were redressed. According to rumors, he planned to study overseas with the goal of attending the newspaper theater. He came to receive the letter for the interview and found it a little thin, so he assumed that he had failed. He was unexpectedly granted a smartphone and was admitted to the international university. Additionally, he received a financial aid and scholarships. His aunt and uncle back home believed that this was merely a scam. Then a helicopter arrived and scooped him up, but that was all in Fei's imagination. He received a call asking him to an interview. After realizing that he had passed the international university, Duong appeared and pleased for him. Fei gasped when he arrived for the interview the following day, because of how enormous it was. But as he entered the room, all of his classmates had arrived for interviews. His crush was also there, so the trip was worthwhile. She didn't seem good after the interview, though. Fei was next, but as soon as he walked in, Aki shocked him, nearly knocking him to the ground. This time, she identified herself as the interviewer. The questions she posed had nothing to do with what he had studied. He began to talk about stars, but they remained quite somber. There were many topics for every science fiction work. In order to save time, he withdrew, since he felt as though a dirty trick had been pulled on him. He dashed out and only wanted to be with Van. Professor Good arrived at the same moment to inquire about the interview. He urged them to get on their knees and restrain Fei because he was the main character. He then made a decision to meet his family and made a very attractive offer. Fei's parents were in reality honorary students at the school. Fei suddenly stopped talking and requested permission to use the restroom. There he read the principal's letter that his parents had written. His parents requested assistance from the school in getting him enrolled because they needed to go for research. But he was moved when a girl approached him and informed him that it was the woman's restroom. The professor introduced her as Dong, but she didn't care much about Fei. He was still attached to Van at his school and didn't want to transfer. He went to the terrace in the evening and began to think about something recently. He himself shared a story about a girl named Van. Dong suddenly emerged, and she was able to locate him thanks to Norma. They sat for a while and talked. She revealed to him what Van thought of him. Dong was skeptical that he didn't know anything. Dong advised him to transfer because Van didn't like him. Fei continued to believe obstinately that there was yet hope. She started to assess the situation for him. Van had never received a birthday gift from him, and he had never taken her to the movies before. Dong asked why he had nothing, but he also desired that people like him. He was aware of it, but he had no other option. He promised to demonstrate his bravery to everyone as a result of Dong's inspiration the following day. At Professor Man's request, a proportion of Teacher Good's pupils must be moved to attendance. Professor Good had to conduct an interview at the Flag, as well because he had heard that the students were really helpful there. Fei and Van went on a date the following day, as he had promised. His plan worked out perfectly, but he was walking when he saw Dong. Dong pretended to be his sister. Van had to leave after that. She informed him the professor was leaving tomorrow, and that he needed to decide tonight. Now just one person could enter the academy through the gate. Dong had no choice after witnessing his refusal. More than anything else, Van was essential to him. The following day, he learned how to introduce himself in the class, and told his crush he had feelings for her. The man who was waiting outside believed him to be possessed. He arrived at the stage and took his place. Some of his friends were also present. A young man emerged and expressed his love for Van. Van then expressed his sentiments to the other man. Fei began to freeze after hearing that. Just now, the members of Dong's team emerged, seemingly to save him from the situation. He was dressed in a new outfit, and he then coolly departed. Dawn didn't want to walk because her supercar had run out of petrol, and she was wearing high heels. Faye had just accepted to join Dawn when a helicopter swooped down to pick them up. Episode 1. The guard at the train station informed Faye that he was a beggar, as well as refusing his request for directions. This guard claimed to have never heard of that route. He laid the responsibility on the guy who had advised him to take the CC train to Castle Academy. Despite hearing that, he had not located the CC route, and he only had $20 in his pocket. He met Finn at the same time. Finn claimed himself to be a well-educated man. After some time of talking, it became clear that what Finn really needed was to borrow money to pay for water. Finn recognized Faye as a Castle Academy student after seeing the card. Finn said he was Faye's senior. Faye trusted Finn after viewing the CC rail card. Despite having studied for 8 years, Finn had not yet graduated from school. Finn was becoming a familiar face throughout the campus. Someone then came out to welcome CC visitors to board the train, as they awaited the arrival of the train. The moment that guy heard Faye's name, he exclaimed that Faye was an S level. The 3 of them were taken aback one after the other, and they all screamed in fear as though they had seen a ghost. The station lit up as soon as the car was swiped. When the CC route arrived, Good hurried outside to embrace him. He said that he would be his final tutor for Faye. Good handed Faye a notepad and asked him to sign it. Although the focus of the school research was dragons, he didn't want information on the admissions section to be made public. They researched dragons in order to kill them. The school intended to train soldiers capable of defeating dragons. The professor, according to Faye, had a mental illness. Suddenly, a child appeared and stated that it was true. Outside, there was also a massive dragon carcass that covered the entire mountain. The dead Dragon King's corpse was that one. Good stated that when Faye regained consciousness, he was only threatened with failing upon a mission. When someone brought the item as the professor requested, he was saying that he wasn't mentally ill. He is Masa. He claimed that the academy hadn't had a S-level freshman for more than 40 years. The other S-level students had already committed suicide. Professor Good claimed to have 2 instances that he had taken from the ice vault with him. One was the piece of scale, but it wasn't a typical scale. He was instructed to fire at the scale with a gun that had been brought up. Faye was not a licensed shooter. He began firing at the scale, but the bullet was deflected. It turned out to be a dragon scale, which was discovered in the 1900s. Castle knew it as soon as he returned to the country. They pulled out a specimen because it wasn't enough to convince Faye. Dragons had incredibly harsh lives, but even if their bodies were destroyed, they still possessed souls, which meant they would one day reawaken. That young dragon was sleeping deeply. Faye was still convinced that it was a model. He briefly stood up before returning to his sleep. Faye could no longer drop out of school because he had signed a commitment. Episode 2. The strong people of the princely level dragons, according to studies, were all in Dinwook, the national language that has been a required module at the institution since 10 years ago, and it was each person's duty to go to the Dinwook Center to kill the Dragon King. The professor acknowledged the day when he realized there were no new students. Then the 2 of them were the targets of several gunfire. The professor was shot with a bullet right away in the hail of gunshots. Faye could see the horrific gunfight outside as it was happening. 2 sides fired at each other in an effort to destroy one another. Faye advised the professor to wait out after the shooting was ended so he could seek assistance. He ran into the final 2 fencers from the 2 teams as he walked. There was a girl who leaped down by accident. Faye assumed she meant to take him down, but she really just wanted to shoot the assassin from behind. However, because her gun was too small, she lost to the bigger gun. Maine abruptly switched to attacking her. Right after was the red-sided captain. Then his bullets left stains on the black side as well. When he was done, he took a seat aside. The medical crew arrived to save the situation as music started to play. A bald man reprimanded Faye because he believed Faye was also part of the incident. It was Mai, according to Good, and she was his friend. Mr. Good was plainly injured by bullets, which scared Faye into thinking he was a devil. In actuality, it was simply a rehearsal bullet because it was a day of freedom for the academy. Therefore, it was a small anesthetic bullet. This, according to the balding teacher, had to stop. The other 2 did not break any rules, and all their injuries were as a result of their carelessness in letting themselves fall. The balding instructor yelled angrily and called the headmaster to report. Not only did the principal not criticize him, but he also made plans to join them in the next year. He congratulated Fei for defeating Caesar, while only being a freshman. He was excited to see Fei in class. The castle suffered a catastrophe 8 years ago, and as a result, the headmaster required geniuses to defeat the dragons. Despite being highly excellent, Castle and Zihang were nonetheless downplayed in comparison to Fei. Additionally, his S rank was not nihilistic. He was put in the same room as Finn, and Finn wanted to take him outside and play with him. All the architectural marvels were present, but it seemed that the journey had been a little uneasy. Then he came across a plant that was both half fresh, half wilted. Episode 3. Finn said that it featured an engraving of the World Tree. People claimed that the Black Dragon King was restrained beneath this tree. It was regarded as the Academy symbol. At the same time, Good arrived to find Fei and instructed them to follow him to the dormitories for a quick test. They were going to test the freshmen tomorrow, and it was a language and writing test for dragons. Good hurried in because he wanted to view Fei's bloodline through the music box in the ice cellar. The roar of the Black Dragon was supposed to be powerful enough to shake the entire continent. At that time, the Dragon Clan's ancestors would visit and bow down there. The Black Dragon's passage was captured on tape by a music machine that a mechanic made. Fei could not comprehend anything after listening to the music box. Instead, he was just tired due to the time. Professor Good deduced on his own, and then fled without comprehending. Fei didn't want to return to his old school, since he was anxious about the freshman test. Finn taught him how to cheat, but there were whispers going around the school that Fei didn't have an alliance with the Emperor. In the academy, Zihang had one of the highest levels of bloodline purity. Half-bloods were afraid to even look at him. His bloodline wasn't important because Fei even dared to shoot him. The largest insurrection in recorded history, the Dragon Clan Rebellion, was documented in sea ice remnants. They placed the castle of Fei not reacting to the Emperor in the research section, since it had to be unique. Good did not want to use him as a research template, and instead wanted to protect him. When it came to the freshman test, the balding man likewise agreed not to discuss it. Someone requested that Fei pass the test that evening because he was filled with uncertainty. Additionally, he was aware that the test would not be a listening test, and only needed to make a few marks on the paper. Everyone looked perplexed as soon as the audio played. Fei met Tut at the time when he was sent to the different dimension. He was transferred all over the place, and when he awoke, Dong questioned him about how he managed to sleep through the test. Nonetheless, he passed the exam and enrolled in school. Finn, on the other hand, was dissatisfied since he enrolled in Mr. Man's class, who was a super assassin who always checked attendance. There were certain lessons that he missed, because recently he had been on a mission. Heard that they had discovered dragon traces. A party of divers were diving in the sea when they discovered a massive metal system beneath their feet. The two of them received a message from the boat to show up since a level 5 earthquake was forecasted for that evening. But unexpectedly, an earthquake struck at that precise moment. Yershang and Aki both lost transmission as a result of the cable breaking. The incident from 8 years ago reappeared. Through the Void Snake, they were able to speak with one another. And in front of them was the palace of the King of Fire and Copper. Episode 4. The headmaster was told to return to the Bronze and Fire King's palace and get approval from him. They would have the right to execute it if there was a living thing in the city that couldn't be captured. The reason for the headmaster's request to bring the other child was because of this situation. Dragons could be seen as either good or evil in the sights of humans, whereas ancient dragons could only see them as ant-like slaves or grasshoppers. They only had 2 hours to breathe after the professor dove. Nona was taken out by the professor, and this small one was the true gatekeeper. The gate was finally opened, and if they couldn't bring the other thing out, they would destroy it. They sent photos, and beneath the shield was a fairly large structure. According to the assessment, this location resembled an underwater ant nest. They discovered a bronze pillar there, with dragon runes engraved on its branches. Something went wrong when Aki was taking photographs. They released her, but her lifeline mysteriously broke. Fortunately, Shang returned. They would get some bronze-related materials before returning. However, Shang hugged the statue the moment he touched it. Aki then entered, claiming that she had been mesmerized by the dragon rune and exploited by the statue. He brought something in a jar as a study sample and hid it behind his back. However, it appeared that Aki started that thing by accident. They left because it didn't feel right. And what Aki started was the entire city. It was now closing automatically. When the bereavement alarm went off, it was evident that someone had passed away. Every time they stepped outside, they needed that young man's map. Simply said they needed the map, then walked away. Finn contacted him and informed him that there was an announcement and that they needed to get moving right now, since all level A students were being summoned. Everyone was summoned to assist Shang and Aki in escaping the other city by deciphering the ancient rune on the bronze pillar in the shape of a tree. Even though they only had 20 minutes, an article could be translated on average in 15 years of human existence. People scanned their student identification cards before diving into their jobs. Fei seemed shocked by their speed. As soon as he realized there was nothing he could do, he thought back to his brother's comments regarding the map. The moment Fei submitted the result of his decryption, the city's electricity was cut off. The route appeared and the map was solved, and everyone turned to look at Fei, who was the one who solved it. Episode 5. Man was impatient to yell their names since Song and Aki's place were acting so furiously. They made it to the shelter and asked them for the keys to examine the map. Then it indicated downwards directly. There was only enough air for another 3 minutes. The man noticed, and that was all they had left. They might have just enough time to escape if they added breath holding and speed. Their oxygen intake, according to Aki, was insufficient. He gave her a kiss on the lips just as she was ready to confess. Shang seemed to like her as well, as he vowed to make a sacrifice so that she may rise from the bottom of society. The professor was celebrating when he discovered something and ordered the spacecraft to land. Despite having enough time to escape, they were unable to surface. They were also very impatient since the academy had lost contact with the boat. Fei's friend contacted him and inquired about everything. The jar was what Shang had given his life in exchange for, according to Aki, who reached up and delivered it to them. She gave it to the professor and immediately hauled it away. The professor, who was enraged, ordered the mothership to pursue the other object. He began firing at it, but it did not appear to take any damage, and continued to pursue them. The professor assumed it was chasing because of the copper jar. After the bomb was detonated, its signal mysteriously disappeared. That stuff had likely already been destroyed. The professor assumed. He blew up as soon as he received the signal. A whirlpool was produced by an extremely loud explosion that occurred. In retrospect, the dragon's intelligence wasn't that poor that it could just consume explosives. However, one more of the professor's students suddenly passed away in front of him. The only thing he could do was to shoot into the ocean, but it was useless. The dragon started to laugh, and there was a warning of one more powerful bomb. The professor foresaw the dragon's scheme this time, so they wouldn't let it to blow up. It turned its mouth in their direction so that when the bomb detonated, it would behave like a bullet and fire directly at the boat. He dispatched the ship right away to Daisung after hearing the dam. The professor broke open the jar when they flew directly there and started chasing them repeatedly. This time, the professor would be able to pay off the debt with it. The headmaster claimed that they had escaped successfully, with Fei receiving the most credit. The bell sounded once more, and it appeared that someone was about to leave them again. The dragon's teeth sank into the man, pinning him to the ground. He informed the headmaster that what they had killed was not a dragon king. The copper jar held his cocoon or bones, and it was merely one of his retinue. They believed they still had the opinion that taking down the dragons was an exciting goal worth pursuing for the rest of their lives. Man began to nod off and requested the headmaster to ask about Nono for him. He trusted him, so he switched teachers before collapsing. The jar moved, and it had to be a cocoon. Episode 6. Seza invited Fei to the celebration and had something to tell him. He was the one who, since he was a little boy, had been held in great regard by the clan as the potential future emperor of the Western Hemisphere. He had been quite aggressive since the beginning of school, and his first sentence was rather cool. However, Fei was only notable for its excellent food. Although Finn urged him to attend the prom because the food was so delicious, he was unable to do so. He still had to leave later that night to lead Nono in. Seza had put up a card that was covered in carpets covered in roses. Although each person's costume looked a little dated, on the inside it shimmered brilliantly. The celebration had just begun. Seza led Nono down, and he actually organized a party to celebrate Nono's birthday. Finn wanted to dance because he hadn't done so in a while everyone else was dancing. After that, Faye was used in an experiment by Finn, and the high heels were retained on his feet. Nono became terrified of Faye after witnessing this scenario. Caesar began his address by telling them not to come there for nonsense, but to fight. Only the most elite individuals were permitted to enter the battlefield, which was just getting started. Everyone wanted to follow Caesar's lead as the crowd surged. He applauded them for joining the group of madmen. Faye was asked by the foreign girl whether he needed a dance partner. She told Finn to dance, and he purposely shoved Faye into her. She suggested the music, and when it began to play, they began dancing to the beat. Despite the fact she didn't want to aid him, he thanked her for doing so. She claimed that he had to grip her waist at the ending to prevent her from falling. After that, everybody cheered. She later left as well. He chased after Nono, wishing her a happy birthday. She also requested that he drive her to the mountain summit. However, a dragon clan unexpectedly appeared, and a warning was sent. The defense system of the academy was built. This time, a group of 13 guys appeared to be the aggressor, and they appeared to be headed for the jar that the headmaster had brought back. They had stronger guards because that creature was now inside the research facility. Armed individuals were dispersed in anticipation of combat. When Faye's brother unexpectedly reappeared, he knew that Faye liked Nono. He teased Faye and then left once more. The engine mysteriously and abruptly stalled as soon as he reached the peak of the mountain. Caesar also warned Nono that strange-looking physiques were invading the academy, so he urged her to take precautions. 7 intruders were caught, but 4 of them were foreigners. The bald man called his father, but his father just murmured his birthday before hanging up. He began to eliminate the precepts.